Hey, what's going on? Doc Danny here with the PT Entrepreneur Podcast. And today we're talking about the 80-20 principle of running a cash-based clinic, and with the goal of really helping you simplify the things you're tracking down to the most important variables. The 80-20 principle is the concept that you're going to get 20% of the benefit or 20% of the activities you do lead to 80% of the gains you're going to see in basically anything, right? So you could take this in context for health and wellness. So, 20% of things that we do lead to 80% of the benefit in business. Same thing. Typically, there's 20% of the activities that we're doing that are going to lead to 80% of the gain that we want to see. And it's really important that we focus on that because that helps us be efficient with our time. One of the things that I had a mentorship group that I was a part of that was really big on this idea of, they call it dollar productive activities. So what activities are you doing that are leading to the most revenue generation in your business? And when I think about this through the lens of a cash-based clinic and what you should focus on, what are the most dollar productive KPIs or metrics that you need to be aware of and really focused on? And there's really three. There's three main ones. And essentially I'm going to talk about these in the context of two things. Number one is getting your own schedule busy enough to where you can hire somebody else. But if you do this correctly and whoever you hire focuses on the same things and has the same sort of trajectory, we're going to see that they can get their schedule busy to essentially full. And for us, what we want to see is once a provider can get to like 80, 90 visits a month, like that snowballs to where they're at 100 plus pretty quickly. But getting to that point can be very hard for people. In fact, that can take some people well over a year in order to build somebody else's schedule up to that point. If you can do it in 6 months, the amount of growth you're going to see is exponential in comparison. Like, think about that. In 1 year, you could hire 2 people versus 1 person, right? So you're essentially doubling your clinic growth each and every time that you bring somebody on because it's twice as fast. So there's 3 variables that we want you to focus on. So number 1 is new patient volume. And there's a couple drop-off points here that I think you should be incredibly aware of and focused on. Oftentimes people think that it's like just focusing on how many evals they have. I think that you need to take a step back even further and see what is your conversion percentage to people moving into an evaluation. And oftentimes when we do this and we look at the number of leads and conversations that people are having, there's a big drop off between someone being a lead to somebody coming in for an evaluation. So the very first bottleneck really is new patient volume. We want to shoot for 8 to 10 new patients per provider as we're growing their schedule. And that can drop to as low as 5 once they've had schedule stability move into place. And I'll talk about what that looks like. But 8 to 10 from a growth cycle. Obviously, if you have more than that, they can grow faster, assuming you're doing these other things. You're focused on these other things that I'm going to talk about as well. But what we want to see is that there's not a big drop off between the leads. And oftentimes this is what we call the discovery call portion. It's where you're talking to somebody about being at the time being a prospective new patient to then actually moving into an evaluation. And that metric right there, we want the discussions you're having with people about potentially becoming a patient, you want to be at 70% plus conversion of this. In fact, last year, we made a strong suggestion and shift for the clients that we work with that the owners of the businesses should move back to taking all of these sort of discovery call conversations and doing it themselves versus having their administrative staff do it or another provider. And it, in some ways, can feel like a step backwards for business owners. But what we saw was a dramatic increase in close percentage, meaning if they had 20 conversations, the owner was going to get 80 to 90% of those people to move into an evaluation, which means they're giving their staff more chances for new patient evaluations than if somebody else was doing it and maybe they're converting at 50%. Like, that'll crush your ability to scale new patient volume. So we want to have 8 to 10 new people, but you have to look at where's the drop off for them to get there. And if you're not tracking your discovery call close percentage, or if you have somebody else doing this that's not you, you might want to take a really hard look at what those actual numbers are and they may be way lower than you think, and it can make you feel terrible about your business in the short term because you're essentially bleeding out new patient volume because you're letting somebody else do this that is not as good at the conversion as you are. And if you think about the difference, let's say you have 20 conversations and you're converting at 50%, somebody else is converting at 50%, that's 10 people that are coming through for new evaluations. If it's you and you're the owner and you're really good at discovery calls, you understand how to have these conversations and how to handle objections and to pace it, and you can convert at 80, 90%. Now all of a sudden you have 16 to 18 coming in versus 10. That's a difference of an entire another provider, basically. So that's why this is such an important drop-off point and metric to track. So we look at 80-20 principle. This is one of those things that, 20% of the activities is going to get you 80% of the benefit. This is a huge one. The second thing is going to be your close percentage from evaluation to plan of care. Now, people that don't do a plan of care, we typically see that they're going to end up coming in for around 3 visits. So it's not that they drop off completely. They do 1 visit and then never come back. That's typically not the case. Usually what happens is we end up seeing them around 3 times because that's roughly when we start to see like symptomatic, change and drop off, and people they're kind of done after that if they're not committing to a plan of care. So, you will have some amount of snowball from that, but if people commit to a plan of care, now all of a sudden we can have a lot more predictable volume and revenue associated with that. So, if the goal is that we're trying to build somebody's volume up to where they're at 80, 90 patient visits, in order to do that, it's way harder if they're converting, 40, 50% of people into a plan of care versus if they're converting 60 to 70% of people into a plan of care. Our benchmark, if it's not the owner, is for it to be 60%. If it's an owner, they should be converting at 70%. They just carry more authority. It's obviously it means more to them. They're gonna obviously do a better job than somebody that is a staff provider historically. As you scale past yourself, 60% is a great place to be as far as scale in your business to have multiple providers. And the more you have, obviously, the harder it is to have quality control with these conversations and the close percentage. But being at 60% at scale is really a very good spot to be. 70% if it's just you. And then the last thing is people moving over to recurring services. And this is the sneaky variable that people forget about all the time. And it honestly makes the biggest difference out of all of these things. And it's because if we're trying to get somebody's schedule to where they're busy and they're a productive asset in the business. Because when we hire somebody in a service-based business like this, for the first few months, they're a net negative on the business typically. Like they're actually costing us. We're training them up. It's a lot of time, but they're actually costing us money because we're paying them a salary, but they're not producing the revenue to even offset that and the taxes and benefits associated with that person. So, as they get to this sort of 80, 90 benchmark range, and oftentimes it depends on your average visit rate as well. This is just sort of like a range you can think about trying to get your staff to. But, as you work towards that, the thing that really, really stabilizes their schedule and allows it to compound and grow is the recurring volume that comes in on their schedule. So the goal should be that you have 40% of people that move to a plan of care that are coming in a recurring visit after that. So, if you have 6 people out of 10 that are converting to a plan of care, that's 2.4 people at the end that are going to move to a recurring service. So if you snowball that, if you imagine like you do that every single month, you're gonna end up with 30 people basically by the end of or 30 people that are coming in a recurring basis by the end of the year. So let's call that just like 30 visits basically. That's going to snowball on their schedule and take up a big chunk. If they need to get to 80 and 30 are coming in no matter what, then now you don't have to make up 50 through new volume. That's a much easier place to be. Just to get to the point where that is a valuable asset in the business and not a liability as you're offsetting what you're paying them. So when you look at these 3 things, the goal should be to build a provider schedule up in 6 months to where they are functional, they're at a higher utilization percentage, and that sort of 80-90 range is where we start to see that. Ideally, we want them, around 100, and again, it depends on how your sales volume is set up and how your average visit is set up, because it could be lower than that, it could be higher, just depends. But ballpark roughly somewhere in that range, 80 to 90. And in order to get there, the 3 drop-off points, the 3 KPIs in this 80-20 principle that you need to focus on. Number 1, your conversion on discovery calls. That's you as an owner, and make sure that you're doing a really good job of, not crushing the top of your funnel, which is where you're having these conversations with people. Because I get this all the time where people are like, I need more new patients. And then we start to look at it. It's like, you need more new patients, but you have your admin handling all of the discovery calls, and that person is converting at like 45%. You're killing yourself. Why are you doing that? Like, switch it over to the owner. And I know maybe you don't want to do that. You feel like you've worked your way out of it, but I'm telling you, it makes a massive difference for the sales into your business. And it's honestly not that much time. If you have 20 conversations that take you, 20 minutes each, you're talking about, less than 10 hours in a month is what that's going to take you. Okay. Not that much time, for something that literally can help you double your business. On the next phase is your evaluation. So this is where you have to sit in and make sure you're doing quality control with your staff. You have to make sure that they're comfortable with talking about the diagnosis and prognosis people have, the plans of care that you have, and that they're doing a good job of actually running your play. And then the last thing is make sure they understand what to do with people whenever they have, gotten to the end of their plan of care. This is a twofold problem, actually. Number 1, they may feel uncomfortable with selling something ongoing. They've probably never done that before because it doesn't happen in traditional insurance-based clinics. 2, they may not know what to do with somebody. This is something that I actually took for granted because I worked with a lot of people in a sort of continuity, ongoing manner. But I would do lots of things like pull blood panels, and I would talk to them about sleep and nutrition, and we would do breath work. And, I would work with them on movement patterns that they were trying to get back into. We would help make sure that we were, building corrective exercise programming, mobility work around whatever they were doing for training. And then we would do, things that were sort of like little nagging things that were bugging them. We would work on those when they would come back in. And I just assumed everybody would know how to work with people like this because I didn't, know any different. I just assume this is what we do in clinics, but it's not what we do in clinics. In fact, most of your providers don't know anything about that, so they can feel uncomfortable around what do I do with people whenever I've got to the end of their plan of care, and that takes some education on your part as well. So it's a twofold issue. Number 1, they may not feel comfortable selling it. So you have to talk about that process, and 2, they may not know what to do. So there's a clinical education component and there's an actual sales component, but that is the biggest variable of all of them for snowballing a schedule, getting their schedule to where it is consistent and they have an opportunity to work with people that they enjoy working with long term. It is it's an easier visit for them to fulfill than like an evaluation. Administratively, mentally, it's easier. And it's fun to have these ongoing relationships with people where you can really be a part of their health and wellness journey, long term, and be a mentor to them and really support them in that. So, keep these 3 things in mind. These are the main focuses that I would say if you are, really taking a step back and it's like, all right, I'm doing all this stuff. What's really important? What matters? These are the 3 things that matter the most. If you focus on these 3 things, you're going to see your business progress, grow. You're going to be able to hire the next provider. They're going to get busier faster. And then you're going to be able to decide, all right, what do I want to do next? How big do I want this to be? What do I want to focus on? What are your goals? And work towards that. But at the end of the day, you can really, really streamline this down to 3 main areas that you need to focus on that are KPIs. There's lots of other things in the business that are important, but these 3 will not change. You need to get these right.